Hello and welcome to Not So Quick Take TA here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is June 12th, 2024, and this is the longer video where I will be covering Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Caspa, and some Rune coins as well. We might even glance at traditional markets as we did have the FOMC meeting and economic data today. When looking at what happened with the FOMC, there was no rate change that was expected. Inflation year over year rather did come down by zero point 0.1 point. Same for core inflation. So the news for the inflation rate came out right around pre-market time, and we did see a big run up in a lot of assets and indices. And then as the Fed came out and made the rate decision announcement, and then of course Jerome Powell began speaking, markets did pull back, but it was a pretty aggressive move against trend in many cases to the upside, especially here on Bitcoin when looking in the lower term time frames. You know, Bitcoin had a big move down from this breakdown structure over here. This was after coming up and basically double topping at around $72,000. Had the big dump off on Friday. Price went sideways, ran up, and retested the lows over here, and then sold off through this big low right here, even retesting that area before dipping down into around $66,000 at the current local low. Now, in the morning hours, about an hour before pre-market, or an hour before regular market open, during pre-market rather, we saw a very big a nice pump up for expansion here on the lower term time frames, and then a big move up just prior to market open about an hour before. So that did all get retraced, and to be fair, it is bouncing right now on the top side of this little higher high here from that uptrending structure, but this is a clear downtrending structure on the 15-minute time frame as it stands right now. One of the things that I do want to point out is, there's going to be a little bit of education baked in with these analysis videos. So one of the things that I wanted to point out, and is pretty easy to pick out when looking at this particular trend, was, we had the, it's green arrow. We should probably change that back to white for now, as I was making charts for many of you in the various Discord servers. Shout out to the Extra Ordinals community over there. You guys have been very appreciative of the work, but also, hitting me up and letting me know kind of where you are in terms of your understanding of this stuff. So I do appreciate that, because it does help me explain some of this stuff as we proceed forward with kind of understanding how I do analysis, and then getting into the more educational side of things. So, we saw that we had this downtrend shift to an uptrend, right? There was a little bit of consolidation, lower lows, and kind of chopping around where there was no clear trend here. But then we started to see this uptrend form, smaller uptrend on the 15-minute turn into a bigger uptrend. Then we had a higher low get set, but then on the back of that, a lower high that then took out that higher low structure. So this was the beginning of the downtrend, and then of course retracing that big move up. So currently a downtrend here on the lower term timeframes, and still a downtrend on many of the higher term timeframes as well. So let's go ahead and look at the daily real quick. Bitcoin basically here on the bands, we're going to start on the bands real quick here, because volatility bands are very important to understanding kind of how far price is going to stretch as it relates to support and resistance. And, we basically, I advise looking at it like this. If we see closes below the lower second, then also break down structurally from the consolidation lows here. And you could stretch that down to, again, I've mentioned this before, at 65,850. And a close below that would, of course, in today's candle, be a close below the lower second. Then we have expansion while breaking down from a support area. And that's where we start looking for, $64,000 at the high over here. And currently, Bitcoin is finding support on this lower high. So we had this downtrending structure that really began to show itself here back in early April. And when it started to really fail is on this particular lower high, because it was lower low territory, and this was really the failure point. It was around mid-April is when it started to breach this higher low structure over here. Then we had lower low structure. Then you're looking out for the lower high. This lower high between around 60, it's 66.8. I'm sorry, let me get this in the right place. 66.860. To the little wick highs there at around 67,225, 67,300, depending on your exchange. That is the high that's currently holding price up, right? So that is an area that Bitcoin is currently finding support on. And if it does break down, then we look to the next lower high structure, and that's between $64,000 and about 65.5. So, that's generally speaking the next big area that I'd be looking at on any kind of an expansion down into support. Would be that area. And then the next area would be this higher low structure that started to form this new trend. So we had the downtrending structure, and then we had the trend break occur coming off of a higher low. So the trend break occurred on the close above 65,523 in this case, this wick high. That trend break candle occurred on May 15th. So that was also solidifying this higher low on the daily, which formed this uptrend. But now we have, a lower high. This was confirmed on a swing and a close. We have, this was a higher low close. This technically was a higher low close. It needed to get above $70,000 on a close over here to really start pushing up again. But you saw that, we did have a higher low, lower high, lower low structure to equal highs here at $72,000 or so, or just below $72,000, which is right around where we saw this prior rejection. Anyway, that came in slightly higher there, just shy of $73,000 on the actual wick. But on the close open, you can see it is around that $72,000 range, $71,700, $72,000, depending on your exchange. Is where Bitcoin is finding the most overhead resistance. So once that area to the top side is broken, then we start looking for expansion above the upper second standard deviation to the all-time high and higher. So that's kind of how the bands work in terms of gauging volatility and continuation. Right now, Bitcoin is in a contractive phase still within the bands here. So the bands are kind of set up in a range. We ran the upper second standard deviation, upper second and third zone, to the lower second standard deviation with wicks into the lower second and third zone. So we haven't seen Bitcoin basically make an expansive decision in terms of volatility just yet. In yesterday's price action, you can also see that Bitcoin did retest the upper first standard deviation. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few different things and throw on some areas of interest in terms of support and resistance. Let's go ahead and take a look at the monthly and weekly time frames. This chart also has the swing high and swing low of this particular range on it. So after the big expansion up, put in the high there at 73,835, and the low thus far of this entire move to this overall range that we've been in is this 56,500. Now you can see that there is the March of 2021 monthly close. This is also a quarterly close open high. And then you've got the October of 2021 monthly closing highs. Now these are closes, and then we have the April of 2021. So we had the March close with that April wick high. That was the first, the all-time high back in 2021 when it actually put in its high. That was at $65,000. So you can see from these longer-term time frames in terms of support and resistance and volatility start expanding below the lower second, breaching below this current consolidation range low structure, and losing basically this order block right here before the move up to test $72,000 or just shy of $72,000. We have that April of 2021 $65,000 swing high. Now this area between that wick high at around 65.5 to $64,000 would be the next big area to pay attention to if we do see that expansion below the range lows. Now below that area, then we look to that higher low structure around where we see this October of 2021 monthly coming in at 61,350 to the close open here at 60,000. We'll call it 800 to the wick low at 60,150. Invalidation of this particular structure right now is going to be below that 60,150. That's where we're then looking for Bitcoin to possibly run back down to around 58.8 at this March of 2021 monthly and quarterly to $59,000 or so, and then start looking at the daily, 58,300 to that wick low or swing low of the range at 56,500, anywhere below there, and I would be looking for aggressive downside expansion, into the mid 50s, probably bounce, try up. But ultimately, I'd be looking for the September of 2021 weekly swing high down to the August and December of 2021 weekly closing structure. Back in February, Bitcoin found this area as initial resistance and as support. So, we do have even local, more recent structure that was built around that historical swing area on the weekly. So I would give it like $50,000 to $53,000. Now, to the upside, any breaches above the all-time high, I am looking for, roughly 75 to 78, 78 to 80, and then mid to low 80s from there, and then come back to it for those, upper 80s to 90, and then 90 to 100,000. But not relevant to really be looking at those right now. We will discuss it in a little bit here when I pull some fibs and compare that to some of the other higher term time frame Bollinger Band setups. But in this case, for this particular move off the lows, to see consolidation here holding up is preferable. Now, Bitcoin is in a position where it's kind of teetering on the edge of this local consolidation structure lows. When we look at the Stochastic momentum pivot, it is now at $69,000. So if Bitcoin can regain $69,000, it is possible that we could see another bounce off of the bearish control zone of the stochastic indicator. Now, this is measuring close over close price momentum, not the velocity of RSI, which is your Stoch RSI. So I actually prefer this. This is running a 6.3, 14,255 look back for those that understand what that means. You can get a free version of an indicator like this called the BA Reverse Stoch Panel by, I'm going to butcher his name. I posted the link in many places to this indicator. You get essentially the same thing, and you can recolor it however you want, but $69,000 basically is the momentum pivot. And then, it's basically pressure to the upside in terms of momentum in that case. So I do have some other fancier paid indicators on here. You can see that I had mentioned in yesterday's video that, the easy part of the bearish divergence here, and I actually misspoke on the higher term time frames, and I even misspoke when talking about the bullish divergence that could come into play. So I will correct that now. This was bearish divergence on the daily. We have seen the easy move of that play out. The next big leg down would be to the edge of the bearish control zone, which right now the read is coming in at around that 64,126. So basically, right around the area that I just spoke of, that would be the edge of the bearish control zone is right here, right around this lower high before the higher low and structure change. So between $64,000 and $65,000, there is the chance for Bitcoin to bounce off the edge of the bearish control zone. You can also see that that would put price below some of the other RSI structure here in terms of RSI, but not below the actual $60,000, 60,800 close there on the higher low. My apologies. I'm trying to hold my voice together. I'm still sick. Feeling a lot better, but still very sick in terms of in terms of the quality of my voice. Now, this would be, if price gets to $64,000 to $65,000, that would be a higher low on price if it sets a low in and around there, right? That would be the edge of the bearish control zone. That would also put it, somewhere around or below this last, bull drive, or the 60,000 to 60,800 close there on the higher low, which means that if RSI goes below that area, for instance, if it were to do something like this, and this is just a scenario, this is not, Bitcoin could still hold right where it's at, but let's say it comes down here and then bounces up, puts in a low. Well, what you're going to see is you will see a hidden bullish divergence, not a regular bullish divergence. And I had mistakenly, in my sickened state yesterday, called it a regular bullish divergence. I was just having a really rough day yesterday. But basically, it would be on my indicators, you would see it show up as a blue line here. And that would be your hidden bullish divergence, which essentially means continuation, or it's a minimum good for a bounce. We did see, this occur within range and then immediately get rejected. So don't get too excited when you see those, but it also being around some of the major, support and resistance levels and then the edge of the bearish control zone might be something to look out for. The only way that's, really in play is breaking down below the range lows here. So understand that it would also have to be on a closing basis. Wicks don't reflect that in RSI. At least not in my RSI there. There are other RSIs that you can set the settings to account for wicks. Now, in this case, looks good. Now, this is the more macro picture for support and resistance. Let's go ahead and look at and follow up with something that I showed everyone earlier this week, and that was, kind of my main downside areas of interest. We saw that from this downtrend, I was able to derive some zones of interest. And we saw that we got, that big overhead resistance at around 70,500 or so, give or take, 26, 27 bucks there, to that 73,835 being the main overhead resistance. And the main downside support is this area here at around 70,000, 272. So basically 67,200 to 300. All the way down to, and that's this, the wick highs here, all the way down to this close at around $64,000. This is the big zone to pay attention to. Can you take that intermediate area, at $65,000? Well, yes, that's one of the reasons why I'm saying 64 to 65 is my downside target if this area breaks down, especially on expansion. And that's basically losing this high, right? So what we can see here, though, is on the daily so far, Bitcoin has failed to close below it. So it has closed opened above it thus far. And right now the criteria would be on the daily that Bitcoin needs to come up and take out 70,200 to actually get moving back to the upper second, start testing around $71,000 and then try for that $72,000 area again and higher. And of course, above $71,000, Bitcoin would get expansion to the upside on the Bollinger Bands, but it still needs to meet the additional criteria of breaking out of its local structure that it just put in at just under $72,000. So that would then initiate moves to the highs and higher. Excuse me. My apologies. I'm going to try and limit the coughing, but bear with me. Now, one of the things that I had pointed out earlier in the week is when Bitcoin was still bouncing around between this shorter term time frame, 4 hour green zone and red zone. And I had mentioned that if it lost it, we're running these lows, need to see 65,850 hold up. And preferably you want to see daily closes coming in above 67, 272, 67,300 or so. And we have thus far seen that play out. And in this case, when dropping to something like a 4 hour, I want you to see what occurred in today's price action as it relates to this chart locally. So we saw the big resistance overhead. We had the green zone that was dropped. This was a higher volume candle holding up this higher low structure here. Then we had a higher high swing right into lower lows. And then we saw that this area, the lows here were basically rejected. And I had mentioned at the time that, any kind of rejection in this green area, watch out for the red area, that red zone at 68,300. You need to see that area hold up. Well, guess what? In yesterday's price action, we saw, the big rundown in the day before, and then yesterday, for yesterday's candle, we saw it move up and then just move straight in and reject right around that green zone. So as it stands right now, need to see about 70,200 here to be taken out. And of course, you need to see on the 4-hour lower term time frames a little bit more aggressive. You need to see about 70,500 start getting closed above. Currently, the 60,300 is acting as resistance, and Bitcoin is trapping between 68,300 rather, and that 67,300 or so. And right now, I do want to call this out because this is pretty important. If Bitcoin does happen to reclaim the basis band here at that 68,300, it's likely that it can come and test into this red zone, but I wouldn't be surprised if it got rejected first passed around the red zone and upper second again. We need to start seeing higher low structure. Right now, this is still a downtrending structure, right? So we did have, a little uptrend in here, and then that higher high, lower low, lower high. Now it's got to try to set a higher low. So I wouldn't be surprised if in today's price action, if it did move up above 68.3, watch around the 69,000 to 69,500 basically. You're likely to see the upper first be right around that 69,200 area. Right now it's around 69,500. So if Bitcoin were to try to green candle its way through right now, I do think it would be met with some significant resistance at the upper first. But if it can pass it, you can see the upper second is right there in the green zone. So it would essentially be looking for it to try to trap back in this red and green zone. And that green zone is around $70,000 to that 70,500. The upper second is currently right there. Likely, in the next 4-hour candle, probably start dipping into that green zone. Same for the upper first, dipping into the red zone. Provided, in this next 4-hour candle, it doesn't just pump up right to them. That does also mean that to the downside, if this lower first is lost at that 67,300, watch out for that lower second. We're likely looking at those lows getting ran again. And because we do see expanded bands, I would actually be looking, it could even swing lower. I would be looking for an initial lower term time frame bounce. That does mean lower term time frame than the 4-hour. But if we start seeing closes below the lower second again and the $60,000 low here, then we're looking for continuation to that, $65,000 area, and then $64,000 initially from there. And if by chance we do start seeing closures above 70,500, then you're looking at that 71 on the daily that I mentioned, and then back to the highs here at around $71.5 to $72,000 or so. So I hope that is pretty clear in the way that I laid it out. We're going to look at one more thing that I have been sharing quite often lately, and that is the zones of interest on the 15-minute. And I do want you to see how well this plays out. And I want to explain this a little bit more, as I did explain it quickly in yesterday's video, but it wasn't a long form video, so I did keep it short. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but basically we had the downtrending structure come into the lows, and then we had the big breakdown. The big breakdown, so we marked that uptrending structure where that high came in. I marked that. And let's go ahead and, do we have an arrow still? Let's just get a new arrow. And we'll just kind of break this down really quick. We had the higher high structure. We had higher lows trying to get set. Eventually it did get set, but it also resulted in a little bit of a closing higher high, but lower high swing. And then the lows were broke down from there. Price comes down, starts to base sideways, and then breach these lows over here with it all in one candle. And the reason why this area, this consolidation is marked, is because this is where the big volume-based candle came in. That was the breakdown candle. You see from wick to close, I marked the candle. You see that price tried to go sideways, lower volume, breaks down again, gets higher volume. So I marked the wick. The wick to close here. Price bounces and rejects from this higher volume low over here above it. Price tries to go sideways and base on this area, gets a big breakdown, but we're not seeing significant amounts of volume for me to call out the support and resistance. This was just a downtrend into a very important area, and this is that 67, 2 to 300 zone. That's our big daily area that we want to see Bitcoin closing above on that daily to kind of avoid avoid keeping price testing down and preserve its chance to stay in the range locally. So this area here, you did see that it broke down, not really significant amounts of volume, retested a few times and then breaks down, and then we do get some more significant volume here. So that area gets marked wick to close here as a red zone, and then we get the biggest candle volume down that we had seen since the initial breakdown here. That marked the low, came back in, lower high'd its way into this previous higher volume candle, set a higher low, and then began to move up and try to regain that daily area. Now, I've been moving these over, but basically this sets up zones. So this was all big volume on the way down. So I know that a lot of people are like, well, all the bulls got liquidated. And you're going to hear a lot of like, well, it was bearish and all the bulls got liquidated. But what you got to understand is there's somebody on the other side of the trade picking that up. That's why you're seeing the volume there. So there is buys occurring in those areas. So, but again, that does mean that on the way back up, all of this is going to act as resistance. All of this volume-based support and resistance is going to act as, on the way back up, on the way down, it's resistance or the downtrend support, if you like. On the way back up, this is going to act as overhead resistance, and then you want the areas to flip into support. And we did see a little bit of screwing around here between these areas, but basically closed back above this red area. We were looking to go run this area, close above this 67 to 40 something. In general, we were looking for it to move up to the next zone. It did play back down, but it held this red zone. So if it's going to hold the red zone, we look right back to this line, and then we look up to the next zone. Hits that zone, consolidates under it for a couple of 15-minute candles, and then lifts off right through into the green zone, spikes it, and gets the highest volume that it had seen since the big breakdown. So from there, it did come up, and it deviated the zone over here and put in a lower high in some of those longer term time frames like we were looking at. Tried to hold the green zone, lower high, comes back down. You see how it tries to hold the red zone, breaks down, did a red candle its way through all the way back to that daily area, get a nice bounce, starts to consolidate, find resistance, support, resistance. So you think of these as zones of trapping price. And essentially what this is doing is this is deconstructing the order book. So you don't have to look at the live order book to understand where those bids are likely to come in. Because it is the most recent move down, on the way back up, you're looking at, where are people likely to try to arbitrage trade or trade it back up for a bounce, and where are they going to be taking profits at, where people looking to sell that are scared. So like they missed it on the way down, so they exited, they were in a big loss, so now they can get out now. So they'll get out at break even or just under break even, stuff like that. So it's essentially volume analysis, turning that into support and resistance in the context of trend, obviously. And then using that to kind of peer into the order book a little bit in terms of, you're not looking at the order book itself, but you are looking at the areas of interest historically for the order book and extrapolating how that will play into either continuation to the downside if it kept going down, and using those areas as overhead resistance or downtrend support, if you like. And then on the way back up, overhead areas of resistance and then possible supports again, flipping those areas from resistance into support as they were areas of interest to begin with. And you can tell because of the volume that was put in. Now, I will be covering a lot more stuff like this when I get into the more educational side of things. I do want to note that Bitcoin is attempting to set a 15-minute higher low here, and the area that it needs to take out, as I'm currently recording this, is this lower high in the 15-minute right here at 68. What is this candle coming in at 68.644? So basically 68.650. If it can set this low in this 15 minutes, it's got about 5 minutes and 30 seconds left, then it's got a higher low. And that's good because that will be the first uptrend that we've seen since before the FOMC meeting. And that's not going to do it for Bitcoin right now. We're going to go look at the 12-hour because I think the 12-hour is very important. This is now set up in a range. I'd mentioned Bitcoin on the daily running, the upper side of the bands, upper second and third, and then lower second and third in terms of wicks and even a close. But this is set up more of in a range look. So if Bitcoin, of course, does break down from the lower second standard deviation, purely looking from the volatility perspective, it has to close below its current wick low at 65. That it would be $66,000. 65 is the lower third. Sorry, got very confused there for a moment. This does mean that Bitcoin would need to close below $66,000, right? That would put it below the lower second. That would also breach some of the range low area. Could it save itself with a swing? Maybe, but it would already be locking in expansion to the downside. It could try to save itself with a swing around 65,850, but if it's closing below the lower second and its current wick low, that's continuation. That's where we're looking 65. You could take 65.5 on the wick by that lower third, but realistically, looking somewhere around that, I would say that if it's going to hit 65.5, it's probably going to get bought back up above the lower second. But if you start seeing it close below the low and the lower second, then we're probably looking at $65,000 to $64,000 there at that lower high before the trend change. So to the upside, at extremes, the upper second standard deviation is above or at $72,000 now, and it is above the local high structure. So if it takes it out, very quickly going to see it at 73 or at least deep 72s here by this high, and then probably running the highs and higher there, 73, 35 to 75K initially, and then 75 to 78, 78 to 80, and so on and so forth. Now, I'd mentioned this yesterday, but Bitcoin now has an initial cross to the upside, and it didn't occur before the FOMC meeting, but it occurred after with the daily close. And the pivot for momentum on the 12-hour is going to be $68,000. So if Bitcoin can close this next 12-hour candle above $68,000, it will get a cross to the upside confirmed, and that would be good, as it will also and has also painted a closing low. You also see that on my particular RSI, it's on the verge of throwing a potential RSI buy signal, and you don't take any one signal when you're looking for potential, entries, I should say. There's many other criteria that I'll get into regarding entry and exit and stuff over time, but this is a 12-period moving average, and I'm sorry, this is not a 12 period. This is no, it is a 12 period, 12 SMA. So this would be one more confluence along with setting a low and then getting the Stoke turn. If we see this next 12-hour close come in above 68, you still need to see the daily close above wherever the pivot ends up. And again, I posted the free indicator, this BA reverse Stoke panel. You can also just search it in the indicators tab. It's publicly available, called reverse Stoke panel, and it has the pivot number. It's just over here, or no, this is the one I'm actually using right now. This is one of the other indicators that I have on over top of it. So keep that in mind. 2-day did close. Now, it was trading below the basis band, and currently being above the basis band gives it, from a volatility perspective, the opportunity to come back and retest that 70,200 area. That is the upper first. Get above there on any closes in the next 2 days, and I'm looking at the upper second, which is going to put us around the highs, around this high up here. So I'd be looking for tests, 72 to 73, and then the all-time high and higher from there. You see 75, 600 just above that at the upper third. Now, we did see a cross down, and this is where I have to correct myself. Yesterday I said bullish divergence because I was stuck with talking about the daily. Bullish divergences on the bottom with that little inverted head and shoulders here on the RSI. But in this case, we have a regular drive of bearish divergence. We also did get a signal below the signal band here, but that was a few closures ago. And on the 2-day chart, 3-day chart, actually 3-day chart has so far avoided the bearish divergence signal because it hasn't yet put in a high. In this case, to put in the high on the 3-day, it's got to close below 67,800. Then you will see a regular drive of bearish divergence populate here from this point, and this point. But or maybe it's one of these other points. I don't know. I'd have to go back and double check in yesterday's video, but it was populating before. And I'm not going to take the time to count the highs right now. We can always do that in an instructional video or something like that. In this case, we would see between, let's see, it would be this high and this high. Yeah. So it would be, I am going to take a look at this because it would be this slightly higher high. This isn't really a strong bearish drive, but it'd be one of the highs over here in this high. We've already seen the bulk of that play out. If it's going to play out any further, it's got to break down from basically the basis band and then play out to the lower first. In terms of volatility setup, we do see momentum turned against price right now, and it can cross back up on any close today at 68,700 because the 3-day does close with today's daily. What else do we got? The 4-day just opened. This looks fine still. Next 4-day, you do want to see closing above about 68.3. RSI looks fine at the moment. No big issues here, and this is set up in more of a range like I was talking about yesterday. As long as it's above the basis, gives from a volatility perspective, nice spike into the basis, by the way, gives from a volatility perspective between the basis and upper first as the most likely areas to test in this 4-day period. If we do start seeing dailies close back above the upper first, which is at 69,200, then of course we're looking for it to play into around the local structure here to the upper second, somewhere around that $72,000 at the highs again. Of course, below there, 66,250 below the range lows here. Lower first, it's coming in at 63,350. Let's see, we got the 5-day closing with today's price action as well. We've got some pretty interesting stuff here on the 5-day because this is a beautiful compression, expansion to compression. Just going to get rid of volume real quick. Then we're going to rapid fire some of the other stuff here pretty quickly. The 5-day basis band is currently at $67,000. Acting as a bit of a support zone. If we do see any kind of 5-day, if the daily closes below the basis band, it's likely going to be testing the current lows at 66 to the lower first, which is probably going to compress a little bit more, but it's right there at 64,376, so between 64 and 65. And then if we do see price get above around 69,500 by the end of this 5-day candle, it doesn't have to happen, but as long as it's closing above the basis, we're looking at a range, 69.5 above there. We're looking for the highs 72 by the upper second. I do have to call this out, anywhere below the lower first, and this is looking to test its 5-day higher low structure on a closing basis, and that's around 61,500. Wouldn't really want to see that, but breakdowns come on candles below 56,500, so not too concerned about it. Momentum looks fine for right now. $64,000 is the pivot, so again, 64 to 65 keeps coming up as a very important area. This is threatening to throw a sell signal. I'm not too enamored with this one. It is in the bullish control zone. Unless this drops the bullish control zone, then I'm not worried about that. That is $67,000 currently is the bullish control zone. So we want to see that area hold up again on the daily. That 67,300 I showed you very early on in this video as one of the big local zones on the daily, and relate that to the weekly. This is looks fine on the weekly. So far, the upper first is what is holding price down. One thing I will say, because it is midweek, you do want to see closes on the weekly coming in above $67,000. You really don't want to see that. You really don't want to see closes, weekly closes below there. It's going to start to look like this is going to be a very long form, possibly corrective structure for Bitcoin if that happens. I would still give it some time, even if it did close below them, because I would want to see it fully confirm. But it wouldn't be encouraging, let's say that. That's going to do it for Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and look at Ethereum pretty quickly here. ETH is, it lost the zone. This is the important zone, but it also, in the same candles, tested down here on the daily into some of the areas that we talked about. So we talked about, it did get front ran at around that 33.50, and it is trying to bounce back up. I will tell you, because this is expansion, if it keeps losing 3,500, and if it starts to close below, keeps closing below the lower second, it's more likely that it's going to come in and test this low again around 33.81, and possibly down into that 33.50, and then the close open structures here around that 3,200 to 3,260. So be aware of that. As long as it's closing anywhere below 3,500, 3,520 here, that would put it below the lower second, more likely to get continuation at minimum to its local lows, and then possibly past them. But if it can remain above 35.20 and start to regain where it rejected yesterday at the lower first band here at 36.34, then I would look for it to head towards the basis, which is right here at our 37.26, 37.25 area. Anywhere above there, I'm looking for it to come right back in and consolidate here, possibly even run to the upper second at around 39.50 to 4K. Momentum, actually, there's a setup here. So again, I would say look for it to hold 35.20 today, possibly recover above 34.60, 37.26 would be even better. 35.13 is the momentum pivot. If it can close above this 35.20 level, that's going to do it. That would also put it, I would want to see it still closing above the lower second. So, but that would put it, within our support range. We would have gotten a deviation down. I would call this target hit to some of our downside targets, getting front run by just, less than $20 or something, or less than, it was more like $24 or something that it got front run by. That's fine. That's pretty much target hit at that point, because any lower, and I'm looking for the rest of those targets to get hit, somewhere around that, 3,300 even, 3,250, 3,200, so on and so forth. But there is potential here for it to hold up. Watch 35.20 to 35.30 today, and especially if it can set, basically it would set a low anywhere above It's yesterday's wick high. I would say 33,670 or so. Then we're looking back to that 37.25 area by the daily basis and right back into range for consolidation. Possibly running the other way on higher volatility or a volatility uptick. So looks like that there could be a setup for me. Might not be ready yet, but looks like it is starting to form. Don't hate it. Don't hate it at all. Let's look at Solana. All right. So Solana hit our main area and it did not break down as of yet. This is not the greatest look. Need to see closures back above 160. Need to see 165 taken out. Come back into range. Try to reaccumulate. Maybe even head up to that 175, 176 lower high over here. That would look good. Above there, of course, we're looking back to 185 to 190 up here, and then to march into the 195 to 200 area, and then up to 208 to 210 again. If this starts to break down, though, we're looking at anywhere below the lower second. We're looking at 150 to 148 getting tested, and then possibly the lows here at 144, 145 region. And then that's the next big area down here. Basically, 135 to 140. Anywhere below there, and it's coming down quite hard for longer. But I would say 160 start getting encouraged again to be looking for this to hold up. Really don't want to see this head down much lower because this is a lower high in the weekly. Again, I'm checking the weekly here because I know Solana was not in the best position when breaking down from that 160 area. Being above the basis gives it still the opportunity as long as it can hang out above around 150 this week. So that's what you got to watch for Solana this week. Pretty simple, not too much else. Now, if today can close above 153, basically, 150, 280, 153, it will get an initial cross back to the upside, and then we can start looking at further targets. Possibly starting to form, but you need to see closures above that 160 region from there. Nothing's happening without that. All right, let's go ahead and look at CAS. CAS recovered beautifully on the daily here. So we saw that on the big move up on the daily, CAS came all the way back down. I had mentioned anywhere above 15 cents. And this low side structure last week, I believe it was Friday the last time I looked at this, at least on a recorded video or stream. It's now trying to set basically a closing. It kind of did. It basically set a closing low, which is why it's pushing up above its upper first. I'll be looking for this to run back to around 18 to 19 cents, possibly hitting 20 cents up there by the upper third. If it can close above the upper first here, that's basically what I'm looking for. Looks very good. Just need to see it closing above the basis band to avoid running those lows again. This, of course, being higher low close, higher low swings, so it looks good. Basis band is coming in at 15.6 cents. And above there, looking good. So again, above like 15 to 15 and a half cents, this is sideways and up. And likely going to go test its minimum. What did we see yesterday? We saw 18 cents tested. So next area would be 18 and a half to 19 cents, and then 19 to the highs up here at around the current high to around 20 cents by the upper third initially. So and then come back to it because that's a breakout. And then weeklies still looking fine, above 12 cents. So CASPA is very strong. I like the chart. Let's go ahead and look at some runes. And we're going to start with dog. Oh, gosh. We got a squishy dog chart. Let's go ahead and expand this out. We have a daily zone of interest above price now, so we should mark that. Let's go ahead and do so, and we'll mark the close to high. So which one is high? There's equal highs here on gate. So essentially, dog is holding up really well, but it hit all of our targets that I called out Friday of last week. This line shouldn't be green down here. I'll change that at some other point. But I'd mentioned, because it's probably more prudent to be using the 4-hour chart. Last Friday, when I was calling this out, I had mentioned that if we saw a dip into the 0.0666 cents and lose that area, at some point last week, it had to be. I'd mentioned that it's probably going to come down and run the 0.57 cents. And that's exactly what we saw. And then we got the reaction that we would want to see in that area. We got the consolidation over the weekend into Monday, and then the breakdown, where it's trying to hold that 0.00666 cents, the devil's number. Comes down to that 0.057 cents, gets a nice bounce back up and through, and now it's trying to hold that area. That's the area you need to see hold now. This zone between 0.00666 cents and this 0.0073 to 74 cents. Above here, and I would be looking for it to run back to 0.008 cents to that 0.0085 cent region, and then from there back to its all-time high. So that's coming in at 0.009 to basically just under a penny, at 0.0097 here on Gate.io. Looks good. It's got some work to do, but it has broken the downtrend. I wouldn't be surprised to see it come back down and consolidate a bit more, maybe like on the hourly or something. Maybe it's already trying to do that. Let's see. Starting to shift back up. It's not fully confirmed yet, but I think that dog has quite a lot of potential to beat a penny and more. And it's hit its value area. It's deep value area, and then it's back in its consolidation zone that it's been in for a while. Looks good. I still like the chart. It's only once 0.0057 to now this low here at 0.0056. Would I be concerned about it dropping further to the 0.005 region? It is likely going to pull back in some of the lower term time frames. Judging by its initial look, but that's not a guarantee. It could just green candle its way through everything. This is subject to, it's a very small market cap, so it's easy to move this for some of the bigger players. So just be aware of some of the zones of interest on the lower term time frames. 15-minute looks good right now, starting to head back up. So it does look as though it wants to test outside of this zone, currently getting rejected, but if it gets expansion above 0.075 cents. At minimum, it's going to go test yesterday's highs at around 0.077 cents to 78 cents, and then I'd look for it to test around 8 cents from there, 0.008 cents. Let's go ahead and look at RuneCoin. That was the other big one. RuneCoin's been having a tough time, but I do think that it's going to be fine. This was a massive drawdown, by the way. But went right into our support area there at 0.008 cents, avoiding our red line zone. It barely avoided it, but it closed inside of the wicks here on the 4 hour. It's trying to turn itself around. I wouldn't be surprised if it retests that 0.0081 cent region, 8 cent region. I would be very surprised if it didn't test that again. Of course, it's rejecting just under a penny there at 0.009 cents. If it can regain its highs here at around just under a penny, basically if it regains a penny, I'm looking for this thing to run back up pretty aggressively to about 1.13 to 1.14 cents. Above there, I'm looking for it to take this structure again at possibly even up to this high here at 1.2728 cents, and then start to test 1.3 to 1.45 cents up here. if we do start seeing it break down from its local lows at 0.00, it's basically the lower second, 0.007828, be aware that the red line of doom is not far away at 0.007257 cents. Lobo's the one that's been holding up really well. One thing I do want to note here, actually, let me go back to both dog and Runecoin for one moment. Look at the 12-hour. 12-hour is set up in a big old range right now. They're in the, these coins are in the weak half of their bands here. 12 hours turned up, and I wouldn't fade 12 hours turning up. On bullish divergence, you might have caught there the hidden bull divs going on here. So back above the basis at 0.0078, basically yesterday's high. I'm looking for this thing to play right back to its highs and possibly higher in the strong half of the bands for dog. Runecoin is also trying to get its turn up on the 12-hour Stoke. It's got some bullish divergence or hidden bullish divergence populated, but it absolutely needs to get above those wick high rejections at a penny. If it can't get above there, then it's probably going to keep consolidating here and or going lower. But 12-hour will turn up on any closes above 0.0822 cents. So it is trading above that pivot now, but not by too much in terms of the ability for it to move. And then I was going to look at Lobo, because that is one that I did not look at last week. Lobo is freaking strong. You can see that it broke out above my 4-hour areas of interest and then found support. Right now it's finding support on this high. Big drawdown into that support. Man, this looks beautiful. And this support zone at this high is going to be the main area of interest for it to hold. And I'm drawing all the wrong boxes here. Hold on. So this is going to be my green zone. I've got to recolor these, but basically around where it's at now is the more advantageous position to be in on the 4-hour. It's above the basis, and it's broken the downtrend. It's in higher low territory, right? So we've got a trend break of the downtrend here on the close above this high at 0.0274 cents. Now it's just got to put it in a higher low. On a closing basis above 0.0276 cents, it's got to do it at a minimum, give it a chance to run 0.03 cents, but I would say you need to see closes above 0.03 cents, which is actually this high structure over here, to start retesting its highs up there. Looks very, very good. 4-hour looks fine for right now. Need to see higher lows set though. 12-hour is interesting here because above 0.02 cents looks good, and it's actually 0.01955 cents, which is all the way down here in between the lower second and lower first here on the 12-hour. So as long as it's above 0.022 cents, even on the 12-hour, it could dip below the area I was just talking about, but looks good. Need to see it back above its 12-hour basis, and then I think it's going to run, like I said, that 0.03 cents by the upper first there. I like it. Looks good. Let me go ahead and pull up another screen here because there were a few people, at least one in one server and then a couple people on another server asking about Pups coin. Now, Pups is not publicly listed as on a SEX, centralized exchange, but let's check Magic Eden. They do have charts on Magic Eden. We'll just go to the line chart because they have more history. Let me get that up, and that's what's going to end it for today. Let's see, Pups. That seems like a fat finger down there at 164 sats, or they were dumping like a very small amount and just trying to get rid of it as quickly as possible. It's not in a bad area for accumulation, but it's really tough to say. It's been in a long downtrend. Realistically, I need to see this thing start putting in higher highs above 213 sats. if it can do that and then put in some higher lows, maybe we got something going on. Yeah, this is a pretty big downtrend. So again, I would say above 213, probably a good bet that we'll start seeing either a nice rip or a higher low from there. But right now, it's not the spike down that's bothering me. It's the downtrend to sideways accumulation that's not been really moving too much. So I would say, understand that there's, 60, just shy of 6,300 holders of this. But it does, decent volume on the daily, about $180,000 in the daily so far. It would have to be a personal choice if you're going to get involved in this. I like when they are listed on the centralized exchanges. Oftentimes you'll find arbitrage opportunities between the listings and the exchange, where one is lower than the other, whether it's the exchange lower than the listing on marketplaces or the marketplace is lower than the listings on exchanges. But they always come to a parity at some point because people are going to be arb trading them. Therefore, upward pressure on one, downward pressure on the other, so on and so forth. I don't know. I wouldn't advise. I would only advise if you believe in the meme coins possibilities into the future, because as it stands right now, the chart is not among my favorites. But I wouldn't fade the pups crew over there. Usually a foolhardy move. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. I want to thank everyone in the various communities. Of course, my own community, which is just a pure friend-based TA community. And then New Bitcoin Order, Extra Ordinals, and Pepe Ordinals Maxis. I appreciate everyone for showing all the love and the well wishes for me while I've been sick. And I'll be coming at you tomorrow from the Pepe Ordinals Maxi server for the 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time voice chat TA Q&A. So if you would like to join that server, if you're not in that server, you can come join and ask questions. I'm going to be setting up these TA Q&As in all of the servers. It's just about picking the times. NBO, where I'm a team member, we're going to try and get something going there as well too, because I do know that there's a lot of you that are in common servers. So we haven't picked a time because you're already in the other servers with me. But we got to pick a time and do it in NBO as well. And then, of course, Extra Ordinals, when I'm feeling better. I already kind of have a time in mind. It's just setting a day, maybe Friday. We'll see. And then we'll come back to that. And I will let you know in the various servers when I do have those live TA Q&A voice chats going on. All right. You all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And, of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care.